Welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into a truly fascinating breakdown of some honestly pretty counterintuitive diplomatic negotiation strategies. We're going to peel back the curtain and look at exactly why world leaders sometimes say things that absolutely outrage the public, but then quietly score these massive geopolitical wins right behind closed doors. It's wild, but it makes a lot of sense once you break it down.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's how we're going to break it all down today. First, we'll look at the paradox of praise. Then we'll get into the psychology of ego. After that, we'll look back at Machiavelli and some historical precedents before unpacking the modern diplomatic playbook. Finally, we'll wrap up by weighing results against moral scolding.
All right, Section 1, the paradox of praise. Let's get right into it.
So, our analysis starts with a very specific, high-profile incident that caused a massive wave of public anger and media panic. Listen to this exact quote from Donald Trump speaking directly to Chinese President Xi Jinping. "You're a great leader. Sometimes people don't like me saying it, but I say it anyway because it's true." Wow, right? I mean, the media and the public were absolutely outraged by these glowing remarks. And, people were understandably furious. It just felt entirely wrong to validate the leader of a major geopolitical rival in such glowing terms.
Which brings us to the core question here. Why praise an adversary? It feels completely backwards, doesn't it? But this is where we really have to do a bit of a pattern interruption. We're pivoting away from the political outrage and stepping into clinical strategic analysis. See, there's a calculated reason for this behavior that goes way, way beyond surface-level politics. It's a deliberate tactic, and it is used at the absolute highest levels of negotiation. Moving on to Section 2, the psychology of ego. So, to truly understand this paradox, we first have to understand the fundamental human psychology driving the whole thing. We really need to look at how humans, even the most powerful ones on Earth, actually tick. Consider this brilliant historical tactic known as the Ben Franklin effect. Benjamin Franklin would actually ask his rivals for a favor, or he'd intentionally ask for their advice. Now, you might be thinking, why on earth would I ask my bitter rival for help, right? But by bringing someone in and showing that you explicitly respect their judgment, the entire dynamic of the relationship fundamentally changes. You are validating them on a deep psychological level.
So the crucial point is summarized perfectly by Dale Carnegie. He said, "People defend their dignity harder than they defend their truth." And wow, isn't that the truth? It's a fundamental rule of human nature. People, and yes, that includes world leaders, are ruled by pride, vanity, fear, and insecurity, way more than they are by pure logic or reason. When you're negotiating with someone who wields absolute authority in their own country, validating their dignity is often literally the only way to even get them to the table.
And here's exactly what happens when you ignore that rule. Publicly losing face shifts a negotiation from shared interests to pure survival and ego defense. If you publicly humiliate a dictator or a rival, progress immediately halts. Full stop. Why? Because they aren't negotiating policy anymore. They are instantly forced to prioritize their own survival and protect their ironclad image in front of their people. Basically, an insulted leader will burn the house down just to prove they're still the ones in charge.
Which brings us to Section 3, Machiavelli and historical precedents.
Now, you should know this strategy is absolutely not a modern invention. Not at all. It's a very old playbook. Machiavelli's principles show us that leaders actually allow themselves to be deceived by flattery. The core theme we're looking at here is that rulers have to be handled according to their nature, not according to the moral wishes of how we think they should behave. Powerful figures literally require praise, symbolism, and ceremony to feel respected. And providing that grand sense of validation, while it's often the singular way to get actual real-world results.
90 million. Just take a second to process that number. That's the source's estimated death toll under Mao Zedong. It is a staggering, frankly horrific number. But we're looking at it because it sets up a very stark historical contrast for our next point.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer ruthless pragmatism of diplomacy. Henry Kissinger got off an airplane and called Mao Zedong a philosopher, a man of great historic vision with strategic insight. I mean, Kissinger completely ignored moral scolding. He didn't say these things because he liked Mao. He flattered him solely to secure a crucial geopolitical alliance against the Soviet Union. It was a cold, calculated decision to choose extreme flattery over morality just to win the much larger global game.
All right, moving into Section 4, the modern diplomatic playbook. Let's bring this historical theory right back to the present day, because, as the source points out, there's actually a specific step-by-step formula in modern negotiations. Let's look at the pendulum swing strategy used with North Korea's Kim Jong-un.
Step 1 starts with an insult, calling him a little short guy. Step 2, that's a massive, highly public threat, saying he might have to vaporize him. But then you get the crucial pivot in Step 3. You meet and flatter, telling him, "You're the greatest." This totally transforms what the media often labels as just erratic behavior into a highly calculated 4-step formula designed entirely for Step 4, extracting concrete concessions.
It is honestly a masterclass in reading the room. It's extreme flattery perfectly balanced by extreme power projection. Take the Soleimani dinner, for example. The negotiator excuses himself from a dinner with President Xi, authorizes a lethal military strike, comes back to the table, and just casually announces it over the meal, all to project absolute unbothered power. Or consider the unbroken eye contact moment, where a direct, massive threat was made about Beijing without a single blink or even a laugh. The message being sent there is crystal clear. I respect your position, but I am absolutely not afraid of you.
So think back to that quote from the beginning. When the leader says, "A lot of people don't like me saying this," it isn't just some off-the-cuff remark. It is a highly calculated move to take the political heat from your own people in order to give your adversary face. You're silently communicating to your rival, "Hey, I am sacrificing my own domestic popularity right now just to validate you." And to a prideful leader sitting across the negotiation table, that feels incredibly empowering. It builds this strange but undeniably effective bond of trust.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, Results versus Moral Scolding.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we ultimately have to weigh the emotional cost of this highly uncomfortable strategy against the actual geopolitical yields it produces. We see a direct contrast here between our society's desire to win morally versus the cold, hard reality of effective negotiation. Look, on one hand, moral scolding earns massive public applause. It makes us feel superior, it makes us feel righteous. But it entirely halts diplomatic progress. On the other hand, strategic flattery incites public anger. It feels highly uncomfortable to watch. Yet, time and time again, it successfully secures tangible geopolitical concessions that otherwise would have been completely impossible.
And here is a very concrete example of those concessions in action. Breaking news from the source revealed: Xi Jinping will provide anything he needs to help him end the war in Iran. This perfectly illustrates the tangible diplomatic yield that directly followed all that heavily criticized flattery. As weird as it sounds, the uncomfortable praise laid the absolute essential groundwork for massive international cooperation.
So, we're left with a pretty massive dilemma. Is diplomatic progress actually worth the price of public flattery? Does achieving peace, or getting a huge strategic advantage, justify publicly validating an adversary's ego? It's a difficult, super uncomfortable question for sure. But understanding this strategy is going to completely change how you watch the global news tonight. You'll definitely start seeing the tactical calculations behind all those outrageous headlines. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.